Good evening. This is Subhash Gatade. Welcome you all to the 44th lecture in the Democracy Dialogue series organized by New Socialist Initiative, an ideological political platform. Our guest this evening is ex-ambassador and right now professor, Mr. Talmiz Ahmed. We feel honored that Professor Talmiz Ahmed agreed to deliver this lecture. An expert on West Asia, Mr. Talmiz Ahmed joined the Indian Foreign Service in 1974. He has held positions in the Indian missions in New York, London, Pretoria. He served as an Indian ambassador for Saudi Arabia twice. He was Director General of the Indian Council of World Affairs. Saudi government conferred on him the King Abdul Aziz Medal for his promotion of Indo-Saudi relations. After retirement from foreign service, he worked in the corporate sector for 4 years. He is now a full-time academic and is distinguished professor for international studies at Symbiosis International University, Pune. He has published 4 books: West Asia at War, Repression, Resistance and Great Power Games, 2022, The Islamist Challenge in West Asia, 2013, Children of Abraham at War, The Clash of Messianic Militarism, 2010, and Reform in the Arab World, 2005. This evening, Professor Talmiz Ahmed will be sharing his views on what lessons we can draw from recent conflicts in West Asia. Friends, please welcome Professor Talmiz Ahmed.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm grateful for the invitation. The war is still ongoing. Several fronts have opened, and while there have been sporadic attempts at a ceasefire, but there has been continuous fighting even as we speak. We have in place from October last year a ceasefire in Gaza, but from October till now, about 1,200 Palestinians have been killed, and they joined the ranks of the earlier number that we had, 72,000. Another 1,000 have been killed in the West Bank. More than 4,000 have been killed in Lebanon, and every day some more are being killed by Israeli forces. And obviously, we have the ongoing assault upon Iran. There was an MOU which came into existence in June, but it collapsed within a few days. And already since then, the United States has launched major attacks on different parts of Iran, and more than 50 people have been killed. It is in this background that I thought I would share with you what I have understood as the lessons, quote unquote, lessons that this conflict has for us. This is an ongoing project. We will continue to see more and more lessons for us. But this is a first attempt to share with you something that is extremely important and something that... Yeah. So this is where we're now talking about the wars. There have been 3 significant conflictual situations in the region: the Hamas attack, the Israeli invasion of Lebanon, the Hamas attack and Israel's response, the invasion of Lebanon, regime change in Syria, which is not directly connected but has important implications for the region, the US-Israel attack on Iran last year in June, the attacks of the Houthis over a 2-year period, and their continuous threats upon us now. What are the broad lessons that I have gained from what has happened? The first and most important point to share with all of you is that these conflicts have asserted the centrality of the Palestine issue. It is important to emphasize this because at various times, the Israelis, the Americans, and even certain Arab sources tend to play down this Palestine issue and to get on with their life as if it does not exist. But the Palestine issue has never withered away. It is very deep in the consciousness of the Arab people. Poll after poll, opinion poll after poll shows that over 90% of Arab people define their identity on the basis of their commitment to the issue of Palestine and support for Palestinian aspirations. Looking back, it is very easy for those of us who study these matters in certain detail that the issue is the product of settler colonialism. Settler colonialism is not very different. The experience in West Asia is very similar to what happened in various parts of Africa, particularly South Africa and Rhodesia, that became Zimbabwe later on, numerous other places, almost all of Latin America. You have this enterprise where a foreign people, descend upon a territory, claim it as their own on the basis of certain criteria. It could be racial superiority, military superiority, or in the case of Israel, a natural claim drawn from the Old Testament, which is regarded as sanctioning this land for the exclusive use of the Jewish people. This is a very recent issue, but the history goes back 4,000 years. And it is very interesting to note that this land of which today is claimed by Israel and has West Bank and the Gaza as occupied territories was actually a place called Palestine where you had diverse communities living there side by side, with none of them asserting a unique claim on the basis of their faith. Diverse faiths were there. The Jews were one of the communities that lived there. And then you had Christians who came there. And much later you had Muslims. And you had different sects and subsects. At no stage in the history of West Asia has one particular community claimed a piece of territory for its exclusive use on the basis of faith. Actually, the story of Palestine indicates that all these diverse communities lived together and that they had very strong camaraderie. If we look at the history of the Jewish people, the mistreatment that they suffered in their 2,000-year diaspora in Europe was entirely at the hands of the Europeans, the Christians, who blamed them for the murder of Jesus Christ. It is as the Christian armed forces started taking over Spain, they expelled the Muslims and the Jews at the same time, and the Jews got sanctuary in the Muslim kingdoms. If the Jewish culture, their heritage, and their faith has flourished and is now resonant in these days, it is overwhelmingly on account of the support they got from the Muslim kingdoms in North Africa and later on from the Ottoman Empire. There is no narrative of hostility between Muslims and Jews in this period. When the Zionist project emerged, it was entirely a European project, engineered by Europeans in order to promote their interests, the interests of the Jewish people, on the basis of their understanding that the Jews are persecuted in Europe because they have no home of their own. So the Zionist movement was a claim for a homeland. It was not a call for mass migration. The feeling of these elite Zionists was that if we had a home, the likelihood of our being persecuted in Europe would be that much less. And that was it. So the large number of people who started migrating to this land, to this area in Palestine, were those who were mainly from Eastern Europe, who were persecuted there, experienced pogroms on a regular basis. As the project, as the Zionist project to set up Israel gained certain resonance in the 20th century, a major attempt was made to win the support of the Indian freedom struggle, particularly of Gandhiji and Nehru. And it is very important to recall that both of them rejected the Zionist project, not because they were worried about Muslims, which has been the canard projected since then. Their objection was fundamental. They saw this project as settler colonialism. And they pleaded with the Jewish interlocutors not to affiliate themselves with Western colonialists, but to affiliate themselves with the Arabs and fight for the freedom of the Jew and the Arab so that they could live in freedom side by side. This is very important to note because many people in India don't know this, that it is a settler colonial enterprise. Now, what happens in this time, just a little before the state of Israel is announced? You have the Nazis. From 1939 to 45, they pursued the project of the final solution. And they killed 6 million Jews over 6 years. This is a genocide. It is regarded as a horrific genocide. But this experience of the Holocaust has burned so deeply into the conscience of the European Christians that they have given a license to anyone in Israel to commit mass murder with impunity. And it is astonishing that the Israeli people themselves have learned no lesson whatsoever from their own dire experiences in Europe. If there is a genocide today, I ask this question, that if in a 2-year period you can murder 73,000 people, this is still a long way to go because you have 6.5 to 7 million people in the occupied territories and in East Jerusalem, almost the same number as the Jewish people who are living there from the Jordan to the Mediterranean. They're evenly matched. In fact, I suspect if a proper census is done, you will find that these are, perhaps the Palestinians are even larger number. There is no way you can exterminate them. And genocide is futile because while the Germans killed 6 million Jews in 6 years, they were defeated in 1945, and in 3 years later, the state of Israel is proclaimed. So I would say to my Jewish brethren that this is a futile gesture. It's going nowhere. You have condemned yourself to a forever war from which there is no escape. Your land, which should have given you freedom, dignity, and self-respect, is now a ghetto in itself. You have exchanged the numerous ghettos of Europe to one major ghetto, and you are constantly insecure. And you have various leaders like Netanyahu who come forward and say to you that I am Mr. Security and I am your protector. And he condemns you to constant war. You believe in him when he says that they are safe because he has locked up 2.3 million people in Gaza and made Gaza the largest concentration camp in the world. And yet, though you look down upon these people and you have made their lives miserable so that there is 60% unemployment there, on 7th October, they were able to come out from 20 different areas from this extremely powerful wall, through the wall, which was guarded with sensors. They were able to come out, 3,000 of them. They assaulted the people, of whom 400 were soldiers. Many of them were killed. And they took 251 hostages. This is an extraordinary failure. What is the principal lesson to learn from this? The principal lesson is that if you have a people subjugated by you, you will never be at peace. Because constantly he will fine-tune these various instruments of rebellion. various ways in which he will seek his own freedom, various ways in which he will challenge your occupation. And he takes, because his life is so hopeless, he is willing to take casualties. Very often, a Palestinian, when I was researching children of Abraham at war, there were questions asked of these Palestinian children that why do you pick up a stone and hit this soldier, this Israeli soldier? And his answer is, my life is so hopeless and so squalid that I would rather hit a soldier with a stone and take a bullet. That bullet will make my life worthwhile. That is what this is what animates these people. Very often you have the Israel has been successful and remains significant on the basis of only one fact and one fact alone, and that is the affiliation with the United States. I will not burden you with the whole narrative of how this was achieved with the various political interactions that prominent Jewish people in the United States had with successive American presidents. They were able to create this artificial idea of a Judeo-Christian civilization. The Israel lobby, as it is called, has deep penetrations in different parts of the American political establishment, and this is where you find that Israel draws its strength. Not for a single day could Israel fight a single battle without the American affiliation. No one spoke about this in public except very recently when Vice President Vance told the people who were unhappy with the agreement with Iran that please remember that you have only one supporter in the world, and that is Donald Trump. Also remember that two-thirds of the weapons that you use are American made and paid for by the American taxpayer. This war has created some very interesting changes, and we are looking at that. For the first time, it is obvious to the Israeli and obvious to the American that Israel lives off the United States. And there are many people from the American right wing and from the Democratic Party who are questioning this. Their actions are still of a symbolic character. But right wing elements are today asking Donald Trump how he could be such an idiot as to fall into the trap that was laid by Netanyahu. Even before these conflicts, but validated largely by the carnage in Gaza, there was already a shift in American opinion against this whole natural affiliation between the United States and Israel. You have elements of the far right who are today increasingly influential. Many of them people who have dined with Donald Trump, either at Florida or in the White House. Many of them are increasingly anti-Semitic. So an element in MAGA, which puts America first, is the one that is questioning today this free license that has been given to Israel to perpetrate carnage in Gaza and in West Asia in general. There is therefore today, it appears to be a US-Israel rift. Very rarely have we seen it displayed in public. We have known about it in the past. If you read the books by Bob Woodward, you will see successive American presidents abusing Netanyahu or some other Israeli leaders, calling them foul language, son of a bitch is the mildest among them. And even in the latest book, Bob Woodward's book, War, he makes very disparaging remarks about Netanyahu, but never had the courage to speak in public. Vance is possibly the first one who has spoken up. And yesterday he made another remark which is equally important, that large sections of Israeli officials made a major effort in the United States to subvert the agreement that the US was negotiating with the Iranians. He was recalling, obviously, similar attempts that have been made by the Israelis in the past, and all of them successful. Another one you will remember was the one where Netanyahu persuaded Donald Trump to to give up on the JCPOA, and you know many of the things that have gone wrong since then. But this is so we are looking at the rift, but we are not sure how far it will go. By the end of this month, Netanyahu is set to visit the White House. We're set to visit the US. It is in the name of the funeral of Lindsey Graham, but very likely he will meet Donald Trump, and it remains to be seen what magic he will play there. As it is, the MOU appears to have collapsed for the time being. Unless it recovers, you will find the White House a very fertile field for Netanyahu's interventions. The other lesson we have to look at is the changing nature of war. Many of us remember American interventions, those interventions that took place in Afghanistan and Iraq, carpet bombing. In one bombing round, 80 to 90,000 people were killed. All told, within a few weeks, 500,000 people were dead in Afghanistan, and another 500,000 people were dead in Iraq. That kind of war appears to be receding. That war was, it was a combination of massive assault with precision targeting. In this particular war, particularly with regard to Iran, you find that precision targeting has been more important. The idea of killing large numbers of people in the population and killing large numbers of people and occupying territory and using occupation forces appears to be less attractive. The American experience of Afghanistan and Iraq tells us that they had a very miserable time holding on in the occupation, and they left with ignominy. They this particular one, yes, they have been precision targeting. The targeting, also the nature, the value of your targets has changed. Overwhelmingly today, the targeting is directed as connectivity projects. Energy, food, trade, finance, and technology. The movements connected with this, because these are the symbols of globalization. They bring people together. They indicate a very high level of interdependence. If you look at the oil and gas that comes out of the Gulf, it supports the global economy. The trade is crucial for global well being. When you have food, when you have urea, 35% of urea of the world comes out of the Gulf and supports the fertilizer sector, which is crucial for food. Also, do recall that the entire region in the Gulf depends on food imports, and therefore, food security is crucial as far as connectivity is concerned. You have financial connectivity because it's connected with technology. All of these countries of the Gulf are committed to a digital transformation. They are committed to two principles: green transition and digital transformation. Also remember that digital transformation has a physical aspect in the shape of undersea connectivity, undersea submarine cables, and you have some of the thickest cable connectivity from India and from the east coming into the Gulf and into the Red Sea. And they make your economy extremely vulnerable if they are damaged. This war also tells you the significance of asymmetric warfare. Here you have massive firepower, conventional power available with the United States and Israel. And they have extraordinary capacity to use this firepower, supported by technology, particularly AI. But look at the response. From Iran, we find that despite the sanctions of 50 years, Iran gave a very good account of itself. Many of the lessons that it had learned from the war last year, it applied now. And it has been well documented. There is an article in Foreign Affairs on this subject. You will find that what they did was number one, depth in terms of their leadership. Expecting that large numbers of people would be killed, they ensured that there would be no leadership vacuum. And within a few days of the mass murder of their top leaders, you were able to find people picking up their new positions and holding on. The second achievement that they learned, was to decentralize not only decision making, but also the physical location of their rocket launchers. So the rocket launchers are all over the country, many of them in protected areas, but each facility is complete in itself. It does not depend on anyone else. So if it is damaged, there are engineers available to immediately repair it, which is why after 4 months of conflict, the intelligence of the United States said that 70% of their rocket launchers are in place. The third point scholars make is more psychological, that the new generation of Iranians are less committed to the Islamic revolution and more committed to the sense of nationalism. And this is where they are, that this kind of ideological commitment to this is, they have moved on from that, very, very highly nationalistic, very much able to take a lot of hits upon themselves, but ensure that they give back. The war tactics that they learned from last year are also very interesting. That they, in the initial days, they used low quality missiles and drones in order to exhaust the interception. And therefore, once that was done, and they found openings both in Israel as well as in respect of the American bases in the Gulf, and they were able to inflict considerable damage upon their adversaries. The most interesting aspect that the Iranians did was to this was the weaponization of the Hormuz, converting Hormuz into a strategic asset. It is surprising that American policymakers did not take this into account. Now, this waterway, albeit it was a choke point, is today under Iranian control, and the Iranians appear to have made up their mind that they are not going to give this up. The Iranian game plan appears to have two aspects. Number one, that they are now able to charge fees. A fully laden tanker has to pay fees of about $2 million. They think that this assured fee collection protects their economy from the vagaries of American sanctions. It's an assured income. It will, of course, it is for the short term and medium term. Over a period of time, the other Gulf producers will start looking for alternative routes. But for the time being, they believe that this is the way to go forward. The second is that they are now able to hold their own in case the Americans intimidate them and threaten them. They will say, we will close the Hormuz. And the Hormuz is now so important for the Iranian that he is willing to sacrifice the MOU and take a lot of hits from the Americans, but he is not going to give up on that. You are going to see a sea change directly as a result of American initiation of this conflict. What have we learned from this war? Very quickly, we have learned that war is no solution. We have learned that it's an ongoing, nothing has happened. This is one more conflict that has been going on both in Palestine as well as with regard to Iran. What do you actually see instead of having no result from conflict? What is reasserted to us is the fact that you have interdependence. The world is connected. You have oil and gas from the Gulf required for the global economy. You have urea from the Gulf required for the global food security. You have then sulfur required for the global pharmaceutical industry. And you have helium, which is required for the semiconductor sector. All of these indicate crucial interdependence on important aspects of our world economy. We depend on each other. What we look for, therefore, is not war. We should focus on deterrence. You must have enough capacity to be able to ensure that you will not be hit. Of course, there can be miscalculation. Neither the Israeli nor the Americans were able to seem to know the various capabilities that the Iranians had garnered over the last few months since they had assaulted them earlier. The Israelis were totally convinced that they had taken out the air defenses of the Iranians earlier and were in a position to destroy the regime, bring it to its knees, and enable the Americans to have their way with this. But it did not happen. To summarize, today we see as geopolitics and geoeconomics are two sides of the same coin. But most of the time in our analysis, we used to focus on geopolitics. We used to talk about military capability, the importance of land, the importance of occupation, the forces required for coercive activity. But now we realize that that is not important and not significant. What the source of power today is control over connectivity. If you have control over connectivity, as the Iranians have shown over the Hormuz, or the Houthis have shown over Bab al Mandeb, you are better off than any other, and you can assert that power in any other way. But you have also the control of resources. You constantly are looking at alternatives, and I will show you a few maps. With regard, I have put this one more point about nuclear power. The more I reflect on it in the post Cold War era, nuclear power ensured mutual assured destruction. Mad. Does it have the same efficacy today when we have both Pakistan and India are nuclear powered, but we constantly have had confrontations with each other involving non state actors? And therefore, you find that you are as badly hit despite your nuclear capability, and that you would, in fact, the cross border engagements with Pakistan has inflicted extraordinary damage upon India despite our nuclear capability. Therefore, for the Israelis to see that this is the way their security is assured, because nuclear power is the weapon of last resort. But before you reach that level, you have considerable capacity, starting from non state actors, very often ragtag groups, who are able to inflict considerable damage, particularly upon occupation forces. Recall here the treatment that the American soldiers got in Afghanistan and later on in Iraq, where these people, the militia, were able to terrify these great soldiers who had the best weaponry in the world, but they were incapable of handling these committed non state actors and finally left those two lands in ignominy. So, my last point on this, there are several other points to make, but there's a very curious thing that has happened, and that is the privatization of peace processes. Donald Trump has rejected the United Nations, set up a board of peace with himself as chairman. He is expected to be chairman for the balance of his life, no limit on his presiding over the board of peace. The board of peace was initially supposed to only look after Gaza, but now it is, if you look at the present day literature, it can cover any issue in the world. And that is, it is now, if you want, it is the last hammer blow to the United Nations system. The Europeans are not supportive of the peace process, of the board of peace. They don't want to be involved. They have not sent any emissary to the board because they still value the Security Council. Whatever the Europeans are worth, it is because of their permanent membership of the Security Council, and they are not going to give up on that. But it is non-functional, and therefore, at some stage, Donald Trump has made peacemaking and peace promotion a private enterprise, with largely to be a commercial enterprise from which large sums of money can be made. I just put these just to remind you of the importance of Bab al Mandeb and the Hormuz, but I also have put a map about the very major undersea connectivities, undersea cables that are there both in the Hormuz and in the Gulf and in the Red Sea, and that any one of them damaged will do very severe will do severe damage to modern day financial and commercial transactions, banking transactions, etc. It will disrupt everything. So the focus today is in conflict and in control, it is corridors and corridors. I've also put down this that what are some of the major areas where you are likely to see theaters of competition. And I'm going to mention to you the Horn of Africa is an extraordinarily vulnerable area, and we should keep an eye on that. But let us move on quickly. A very important aspect of this conflict that we have seen just now is the importance of leadership. I'm principally mentioning that because we effectively don't know too much about how Iranian leadership functioned. We only know that they were able to manage the transition from the murder of their top leaders. There were three types of leaders: the political, the military, and the nuclear scientists. And in each of them, despite massive assaults by the Israelis on several occasions, they seem to have come out all right. But their internal decision making process, said to be decentralized and not dependent on the views or position of one single leader. We, for example, do not know the power which has accrued to Mujtaba Khamenei. We do not know how the IRGC is functioning. Is it a cohesive entity? What is the relationship between the IRGC and the army? We don't know. One thing we do know, ladies and gentlemen, and that is Donald Trump. I cannot imagine. I mean, as a student of international studies, of international relations, we don't normally study the personality of leaders. That is part of psychology. Occasionally, you see an article looking at the persona of a particular leader and suggesting a certain line of action. But Donald Trump is a unique individual on the world stage. And his personality is worthy of discussion because of the way in which it impinges on extraordinary decision making in crucial affairs of the world. A person so obviously unstable, so obviously unreliable, so obviously far away from the truth, one who has no gravitas whatsoever, has never given an indication that he has understood a serious matter. Yet he is the President of the United States. He has also surrounded himself with some of the greatest mediocrities that the United States can provide at any time. None of them is capable of any serious negotiations, as their interactions with the Iranians have shown. The Iranians are past masters in negotiation, and they make mincemeat out of these people. Many articles that have emerged about the MOU show how one sided the document is, because you had Witkoff and Kushner negotiating with the Iranian, clueless in themselves. Even Vice President Vance, the article says that I read by a French scholar, said he is not known for diplomatic skills. Iranians, when they discuss serious matters, they discuss them seriously. They are totally committed to the national interest and they don't give up. And now you hear something which is absolutely unacceptable and indeed shocking, that an Iranian whispered to Vance that Witkoff and Kushner were wanting to privately discuss with them certain projects where money could be made. Now, we are aware of this propensity towards the Midas touch. There's an article in the latest Financial Times on the cover of Arts, of Life and Arts. It says the Midas touch. And how much money Donald Trump has made as president within just 2 years of his second term. Now, this is criminal. This is the kind of leadership that we have. Now, what does this do? Totally self absorbed, totally self centered, easily manipulated. Therefore, if Netanyahu is one of the most wily politicians we have in the world, He has understood Donald Trump's weaknesses. He knows how to play on his ego. When he sat with Donald Trump on 11th February, he was able to convey to him that you could become the greatest president the United States has ever seen because you will lead from the front regime change in Iran. So many of your great leaders wanted regime change and they got nowhere. You will be greater than Ronald Reagan. You will be greater than any of your predecessors. You will be greater, perhaps, even than Abraham Lincoln. You are a warrior and you are a statesman. You will get regime change. Just follow me. He was able to tell him the Iranians are a few weeks away from a nuclear weapon program, but he said, don't worry about that. There is no way you can negotiate with the Iranians on nuclear issues. They are an existential threat, and therefore we need to decapitate that country. And that is what you. Now, here you have to worry that such significant decision. Now, when you saw about the Hormuz, the Iranians have made it very clear that Hormuz is theirs. And if you look at the MOU, it says that they will be negotiating maritime services. And therefore, when you have the US Navy quietly encouraging ships to bypass the northern route set out by Iran, 125 ships went through. Three or finally the Iranians, after giving lot of warnings, got exasperated. When the Secretary of State and the Secretary of Defense met Donald Trump, they told him that they hit three tankers, none of them American. And he withdrew from the MOU that minute. He took away the license that he had given to the Iranians to sell oil. He lost it. He lost it because he saw this as a personal affront. He's an unstable individual. He feels very bitter when he is thwarted. And he saw this as a personal attack upon himself. And this is what you find, that he then has gone, 8 days have passed with continuous bombing of Iran. He has gone back to what it was before. You had done a month of bombing when in early April he agreed on a ceasefire. And nothing has been learned by him. Successive American presidents have convinced themselves that we can bring Iran to its knees if we continue to bomb them. This is precisely the one weapon the Iranian has never been able to succumb to. So we have today a scenario of serious decisions being taken by an individual who is patently unfit in terms of capacity to take that decision, no knowledge of any subject, but at the same time, the American order being what it is, there is no way in which you can bring him to heel. And therefore, we are condemned to war continuously. The Iranian reading of the scenario is very clear. The Americans are not to be trusted. Any agreement they enter into, they will withdraw from it. And if you look at the entire history relating to the American engagement with Iran, agreement after agreement has been entered into in good faith, and immediately another president comes and he withdraws from it. Iranians, therefore, they have seen the MOU, the fate of the MOU in the same light. That any concession the American gives to you, he will withdraw at will. Therefore, you need to be self-sufficient. Do not give up the Hormuz, because you need the Hormuz as a guarantee for your financial and economic well-being, because the Americans are not to be trusted. Very quickly, the regional order is in disarray. We do not know. The GCC is extremely insecure. The GCC states have no capacity for protecting themselves. I have argued many times, and may I quickly repeat it, the various states that the British created after the Second World War were inherently defective in that they were incapable from their birth. They were incapable of being able to look after their own security. The states are Pakistan, Israel, and the 6 countries which now constitute the Gulf Cooperation Council. Each of these countries inherently will depend on the West for its security. Pakistan did that for a very long time until it got hints of the Americans being disenchanted with it, particularly due to the events in Afghanistan, could not do without Pakistan. But once the Americans withdrew from Afghanistan, they dumped the Pakistanis. Anticipating this, the Pakistanis had astutely balanced themselves by turning to China, and China has been their all weather partner since then. Israel cannot live for a single day without its association with the Americans. Their support is defense, the support is economic, and it is diplomatic. The Gulf countries are exactly in the same predicament. Now, during the course of this war, what do they see? They are threatened by Israel, they're threatened by Iran, and they do not have any security guarantor. For far too long, they have depended on the Americans. But repeatedly, the Americans have made clear that they are not going to fight somebody else's battle. I do not recall a single occasion in the last 40 years when the Americans have intervened largely on behalf of the Gulf. The Americans will use firepower in their own interest, never in support of someone else. But now the Gulf countries do not know where to go. Before this war, they had attempted to befriend Iran. And they had diplomatic engagements with Iran, normalcy with Iran, very positive political and economic ties. But the Iranians will repeatedly remind them, we didn't start this war. But you are the ones who have given bases to every one of them. And those bases are being used to attack us. And therefore, there is an article by Jawad Zarif, the former foreign minister, who actually blames the GCC for their own predicament. And he says an imported security architecture serves no useful purpose. Come back to the region and look for your security within the region. They, they do not know which way to turn. They do not know what is the outlook for Iran. What will be the nature of Iranian politics after this conflict is done? What will be the approach of the Israelis? Israelis have already positioned themselves at Somaliland. Are we going to see an Israeli threat in a very crucial area of Bab al Mandeb, the Red Sea, and the Gulf of Aden? Uh, so you have a very grave set of uncertainties in this region. Various ideas are being thrown up. Many of them have no relation with reality, and many of them die at the rock of uncertainty and unpredictability relating to the regional outlook. But some of them are that the GCC should have a non aggression pact. And when I heard this, I asked that the last time you heard this was between the Soviet Union and Nazi Germany. And it lasted for a very short while. The two of them were sworn enemies, and the Nazi Germany attacked the Soviet Union, non-aggression pact or no. Any agreement that you have, and the same goes for Finlandization, that you need someone who can guarantee that agreement. You have no guarantors today, and therefore you come to this very difficult concept of a collective security arrangement. A collective security arrangement that brings together uh, within one conclave the major players in the region, the six countries of the GCC, Iran, Iraq, Yemen, etc. Somebody has to promote it. But as of now, I'm going to talk about India a little later, but as of now, I can see only China, possibly affiliated with the Russian, as the principal role player in this regard. What is the outlook for the world order? I start with a quote. The United States and Israel fought Iran and China won. More and more, as you see the United States losing its stature, largely on account of the follies and foibles associated with Donald Trump, going back to the defeats and setbacks of Afghanistan, Iraq, and Libya, you find that this is a superpower which has very little standing in regional affairs. It is today incapable of guaranteeing the security of anyone. And therefore, and of course, Donald Trump has also systematically frayed the Western alliance as well. And you find that the kind of language he uses for his own allies, less said the better. He has contempt for both, for the European. But at the same time, I have put this sentence there: imperialism is not over. The desire to dominate other areas, dominate them because it makes you feel good, dominate them because they have resources that you need, dominate them because they give you material or military advantage. That impulse still remains. And therefore, we have to remain constantly prepared. World order is in disarray, but the West has not rolled over. I should not say the West anymore. Let me talk only about the United States. The United States has not rolled over. It is therefore it is not giving up its hegemony. It is not giving up its control over the order, despite the serious setbacks it has had. It claims that it has extraordinary firepower, but every war the Americans have got into, from Vietnam to Iran, every one of them they have lost. Their capacity today, ladies and gentlemen, is destruction and more destruction. And this is what they are best at. But they do not do anything constructive. They never use their own diplomatic capabilities. Any time that the United States sees a problem, it unleashes its air force and then its armed forces. No, their presidents do not have counselors around them who can give them different options and suggest that this is not the best option to go forward. Very often you have seen, and this is more obvious with Donald Trump, they surround themselves with generals who speak their language, and desperate to hold on to their rank, they will accommodate even the most harebrained schemes of their president. Not one of them has the courage to say to the president, I'm sorry, sir, you are wrong. You are harming the national interest. You are putting my soldiers in danger, and you are serving no American advantage that I can see. I would like to see a few of these generals come out. Today, you have seen that the Trump administration has removed very large number of senior officers from their top positions only because they happen to be non-white or they happen to be women. This is, I'm sure, had a very negative impact on the forces. More and more you find people coming around the president who are considered by their peers as serious mediocrities. So the mediocrities that you see in terms of the civil administration is matched by mediocrity that you see in the armed forces as well. I personally feel that we are bound towards a certain change. But I must give you a warning straight away, because we should not take multipolarity for granted. Because the global south is a divided house. We are still carrying the weight of our colonial experience. The level of self confidence that we need is missing in many cases. Many of our elites are quite happy to accommodate the interests of outsiders, including former colonies. We are willing to sacrifice national interests for a pittance, and you find that our main enemies are always other countries of the global south. The West will always take advantage of this. We use the term divide and rule. This is now used so often it is a cliche, but it is the lived experience of countries in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. Divide and rule. They are able, even though they are feeble, even though they have the worst leadership in the world, even though they are morally corrupt, even though you are a rising people and we are drawing strength from our own heritage, you still find that our feuds are in our neighborhood and not with the imperialist who seeks to dominate us. I have put this slide with a great deal of hesitation because for me it is a narrative of disappointment that in this extraordinary venture, extraordinary series of events that have taken place over the last 2.5 years, the missing actor, missing in action, or whatever word you want to use, the missing actor is India. India has detached itself as if it has nothing to do with this region. There is, in fact, a very foolish absence of action, and that is, it is not our war. And then you have the Gulf conflagration, and people like me stand up and remind you that all your energy security is linked with that, all your the trade connectivity is linked with the welfare of that region, the investments are connected with the welfare of that region. You have major connectivity projects. You have major connectivity projects, technology projects in the region, and above all, you have 9 million people who live and work there, who support each of them supports 4 to 5 people at home. Therefore, 40 million people, 50 million people, 50 million Indians depend directly on peace and stability in the region. As it is, those 9 million people also send home $40 billion. It is in this background that I would say that we have taken no. We argued before the international community that we are the voice of the global south. You have not heard any mention of this over the last 3 years. South Africa took the case to the International Court of Justice about genocide. India was totally silent. India has taken no interest in what is happening. Very recently, I got the news that India has provided some assistance to Palestine. And then I heard this horrible thing that this is not a sea change. India has made itself a candidate for the UN Security Council. The vote is next year in June, and therefore we are trying to look good. Our competitor is Tajikistan, which had announced its candidature 3 years ago. If that is the case, I am seriously embarrassed. I do believe there is scope for correction. I don't see any evidence of it. I don't see any pathway towards it. But I would like to see my leaders and my former colleagues put their heads together, shape a vision for India, consensual vision for India, work on strategies to realize that vision, provide the resources to realize that vision, resources, financial, technical, technological, and also in terms of human resources. Constantly review the vision in terms of realities around us, but pursue the vision with seriousness. We have to become active in the diplomatic circuit. This is firstly, it is our strategic space. The space that is Eurasia, that is Central Asia, West Asia, the Indian Ocean, Southeast Asia. At the beginning of the last century, a British commission of inquiry had described this as India's strategic space. What a visionary thing that was. It still is exactly the same. But the space has to be constantly monitored, constantly defended, and our interests constantly promoted. We have today abdicated much of this responsibility and interest. And therefore, other players have emerged. And we are perturbed about that. We are perturbed about it because we see China active in Central Asia, active in West Asia, active in the Indian Ocean, active in Southeast Asia. We should be all over the place ourselves. I have said, as a student of Indian history, that the normal aspect of India over 4,000 years was two things: a confident people and a connected people. We were constantly traveling. We were constantly traveling across the subcontinent. We were constantly present at the Silk Road. We were constantly using the spice route. Our ancestors traversed from different ports of India right across to West Asia, the Arabian Peninsula, traveled through the Gulf, traveled through the Red Sea. We have evidence of our people at Sumeria, Assyria, and Babylonia, and at Egypt. We have been present at Persia. Indian merchants were central figures in the Silk Road. We were connected, of course, and we are proud of the greater India that we have in Southeast Asia. Why have we lost our self confidence? Why have we lost this sense of connectivity? Everyone else knows it. The people of the Gulf recall the links with India that go back so many thousand years. There is a very high level of cultural comfort. And when they are passing through this extraordinary period of despair, India says this is not our war. That has to be corrected. My last point, ladies and gentlemen, is this. Are we looking at a scenario that would be a realization of what Huntington had said, the clash of civilizations? The idea of civilization, without going deep into history, say we talk of Western civilization, is a construct from the 19th century, when there were people who thought that we in the West, products of the Renaissance, the Reformation, and more importantly, the Enlightenment, the East at that time, feared and despised, was not the Orient, it was Russia. Russia had defeated Napoleon, and their emperor sat in the higher councils of Europe. And he represented a very huge country, an extraordinarily large country, but a very complex country. And these people sitting in the capitals of France and the United Kingdom, and possibly later on from Berlin, saw this as a barbaric nation and said it is more Asian than it is European, despite the fact that Catherine had tried to use French as their language in Russia. Much has happened since then. As the imperialist project expanded, it was founded on racism, the white man's burden, looking down on Asian people whose civilization went back several thousand years. But the imperialist had an explanation. He said, yes, you were great at one time, but you only grew half. Your mind did not become completely developed. Therefore, with that half knowledge and with that half wisdom, you did what you did. Today, the completeness of the mind, of the intellect, is found in the white person's mind. And this is a natural bearer of global civilization. You have later on the idea, I have talked about it, the Judeo-Christian civilization. But very recently, as if to challenge the Western civilization, the idea of the European Union, the idea that brings together the power of NATO, you have Russia, China, India, Iran, Turkey asserting a cultural, asserting a civilizational identity. And this is where we are. We do not hear much about Islam. The Arabs are silent, they are divided. The reason why Islam is not seen as a player in world affairs is because the empires of the Mughal Empire, the Safavid Empire, and the Ottoman Empire were divided into 35 countries. And therefore, it was ensured, deliberately ensured, that no cohesive Muslim empire would emerge to challenge the West. Look at the history. The principal encounters the West had were always with Islam. And therefore, they took power from Islam in the 18th century, step by step. But till then, if you recall the very powerful influence of the Crusades, where after the first crusade, they lost every one of them and never recovered Jerusalem until 1918, when at that time, General Allenby enters Jerusalem and says, Saladin, we are here. The British, the Westerners understand the movement of history. We don't. We use history for contemporary politics. Therefore, we see Huntington's thesis. But Huntington's thesis, please remember, ladies and gentlemen, Huntington was the disciple of Bernard Lewis, who was a hardcore Zionist. Bernard Lewis encouraged Huntington in regard to this thesis because they were concerned after the Cold War that there would be demands upon Israel to compromise with the Palestinian aspirations. And therefore, it was important for them to create an enemy to create and make Islam the enemy. There could never be. This is an absurdity. It was a geopolitical absurdity because Islam was never a cohesive force. It had not been a cohesive force for much of its time. But certainly, when this book was written in 1990, the monsters that they created were the monsters of Al Qaeda and of extremism, but failed to inform their readers that Al Qaeda was an American construct largely to confront the Soviet Union in Afghanistan. It was, but there it is. Once you had created this, it was going to hit you back, and they hurt you hard, and they hit you on 9/11. So this is where we are. There is one very, very curious affiliation that is emerging, and that has, according to me, has is both ahistorical and shallow. This is the sense in sections of Indian opinion that somehow the ideology of Hindutva and the ideology of Zionism are actually affiliated, linked with each other. We are actually brothers under the sun. And try as you might, anyone who has read even basic literature relating to Zionism and even more basic literature relating to Hindutva will find it impossible to see any link between these two completely separate experiences. Zionism emerges from some other traditions of Europe, which are linked with overwhelmingly with the European experience. It was never founded on being on animosity towards Islam or anyone else. You had in the 1960s certain documents of the Israeli consulate general in Mumbai were published. And one of his reports of the 1960s from the consul general, he met a group of people from RSS and Jansang. And in his reports, he disparages them and calls them a bunch of Hindu fascists came to see me and dismisses them. And today, in this scenario, we are able to see this affiliation. And if you ask anyone who says that he belongs to the tribe of Hindutva, from the ideology of Hindutva, he will say they hate Muslims, they kill Muslims. They are the ideal for us because they are doing things that we would like to do. So this is a very weird thing. But there is another thing that I must talk to you about, ladies and identity politics. All across the Western world and large parts of the Asian world, you find in democracies, we are giving up on composite culture and affiliating and building up the idea of identity politics, which has yielded space for a new form of governance called populism. This is something, it is racist, it is Islamophobic, it is increasingly anti Semitic. In India, it is constructed around the idea of demonizing Muslims. Is this, therefore, this civilizational identity? Can it be the source of conflict the way Huntington had envisaged? Certainly, within the domestic in our scenario, it is very much resonant, whether you are in the United States or you are in France or you are in Britain or in Germany or in India. You find state order very often supports the demonizing of certain communities and allows a degree of violence to be perpetrated against them, provides them with second class status. Very often, the climate that is so created encourages individual acts of violence, and though that is certainly the case. Can it be used in interstate conflict? As far as Israel is concerned, certainly it can be, and it is doing so even as I speak to you. India-Pakistan divide, though it has important historical, geopolitical, and other considerations, surely there is also this feeling of identity of Hindu versus Muslim, that constantly fighting the last battle of Panipat, the fourth battle, the fifth battle, the sixth battle, somehow seeking to erase 1400 years of what is seen as slavery. This is absolute rubbish. Last point, ladies and gentlemen, and with that I finish. Whatever you see around you, these are parts of patterns. History is a joy in itself. It is an education. It sharpens your mind. It deepens your understanding. But at the same time, it is not a blueprint for the present or the future. There are patterns. Look at West Asia. West Asia, when you look at the original parts of West Asia, this was the cradle of civilization, of Sumeria, Assyria, Babylonia, Egypt, and later all of that, Persia. And then you have later on the encounters with the West. Constantly you have encounters with the West of Alexander, of Greeks, and of the Romans. You have the rise of Islam, where this region spreads widely east and west. And then you have the retreat, where the West comes forward and subjugates you. Today, ladies and gentlemen, we are at the cusp of a major change. The change could be geopolitical, it could be geo-economic, it could be geo-civilizational. It is how that change, what that change becomes, what shape it takes. There is grave uncertainty in that regard. We have that as our challenge today. That is it going to be the empowerment, the freedom, the real freedom and empowerment of subjugated peoples of the past? Or is it going to be once again the triumph of imperialism that we have experienced for far too long and whose descendant as neo-imperialism we are living with today? So let me pause at this point, and I thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your attention with me. Mr. Gatade, your
yeah. Thank you. Presentation about a very complex topic before all of us, and I'm sure the points you raised must have resonated with all the listeners and participants. But before I open the floor for discussion, I will request my friend and senior comrade of facing some problem.
Subhash, you are muted. Subhash, you are muted. Now you can talk.
I'm not able to.
You're muted, sir.
Now you are
The
unmuted.
problem.
No, Subhash, you are getting muted automatically. It seems there is a problem. Now you are unmuted and again muted.
Ravi, can you please? I'm facing audio problem.
Yes. Thank you, Subhash.
Sorry. Thank you very much,
Subhash, and
Professor Talmiz Ahmed, for this exciting, insightful presentation. Before I open the floor for discussion, I will request my friend and senior comrade of NSI, Ravi, to give his initial comments. Ravi, please.
thank you, Subhash, and thank you, Talmiz Sahab, so much. It was wonderful. It was so comprehensive, so insightful. It's really thank you so much for educating us about such complex things involving the entire global order and the conflict that is still going on. Uh, uh, there are many. I am sure there will be very lively discussion with the audience, because you have, after such wonderful talk that you have given, and I'm sure there will be many questions as Subhash and Bhargav prepare to invite comments and questions from the audience, which includes many well-known names I see. Let me just start the discussion, so to speak, by asking you. I have this puzzle in mind, in the light of what you have said, and earlier too, how to make sense of the foreign policy, and if there is any strategy behind it, a strategy and foreign policy of the current regime in India, and see what if I try to make sense of the foreign policy of India today. Three things come to my mind, and I would like to know from you, how do you make sense of, you are better placed to do that. The current foreign minister must have been your colleague too. So the three things that come to my mind is one, that the foreign policy has become ideological. So for whatever reason, as you pointed out, if the Hindutva people feel that because Zionism is a powerful instrument to, suppress, oppress, or kill Muslims, with which resonates with Hindutva people. So that is why this Hindutva Zionism closeness, Modi going 2 days before the war starts, and Trump and Netanyahu and Modi being, probably closest to each other, as in terms of their thinking, what is happening in the world. So first thing that comes to my mind is that it is ideological. Rightly or wrongly, Hindutva people have felt that Zionism could be their closest ally, and that is what is driving the current absurdity of foreign policy of India. The second thing that comes to mind is that it may have something to do what happens behind the scene, Epstein files and other things that might be involved, and very powerful people. The way Israel operates, the way US operates, the way CIA and Mossad operate, they have control of powerful people in India. And the third thing that comes, that which I would like your assessment on, that maybe it is possible that beyond these two things, they read that despite what is happening in the world, the Western dominance is not going to decline. So all people like us who hope that the world order dominated by US for so long is changing, and now a multipolar world order is in the offing, and now China and Russia together, will play the other pole, and the countries of the global south will have another option, another pole to go behind. But the Indian regime might be thinking that US is not going down that easily and that soon. And given all the factors, maybe they have decided to stick to the Western, what should I say, slavishness to Western hegemony, or Western imperialism. They have strategically, thoughtfully decided to stay with that because they cannot imagine. India has been close to Russia, but they cannot imagine being under the leadership of the next global superpower, China. So they have decided deliberately that US is not going down that soon. US will still be the most powerful country economically, militarily, and so on. So it's a rather rational choice on their part to follow this kind of foreign policy. So what do you think, what is the I am convinced that Indian foreign policy is very disappointing today. Doesn't make sense. But if you try to make sense from the position of the people who are ruling India, then how do you see it?
Yeah. Thank you, sir. If you don't mind, I will take about 4 or 5 questions and respond to them one after the other. So if there's any other question, I'll be happy to.
Go ahead, Subhash.
Before I take, I request we have with us Professor Manishankar Iyer, Talmiz Ahmad Saab's colleague. I will request him to share his comment and questions. Mani Saab.
I hadn't asked for the floor because all I have to say is that in a lifetime of having listened to lectures, I don't think I can recall anyone that was as comprehensive, as incisive, and as global in its approach as Talmiz's performance this evening. I'm very privileged to have been among the listeners. And while I have learned a lot, I don't think I have any questions to ask.
Thank you, sir. You have been my mentor, as you know, And whatever little I have to say and understand, you have been a very powerful force involved with that.
Well,
Bhargav, go
the
ahead, take
child,
other questions.
can I say, the child is father of the man.
Okay.
Yeah, please. Uh, I request Talmiz Saab, can you take Ravi's questions, comment? Can you
Is
just
there any other question? Otherwise, I'll start responding to what I've already
yeah,
got.
please do it. Please do it. I mean that
Yeah. See, the Indian foreign policy is not a standalone, a separate movement of force. It is directly linked with and is a function of the domestic scenario. Now, in the terms of the domestic scenario, you have a scenario of delusion, of co-option of certain people on the basis of animosities, the destruction of the memories of the contributions of people from the past, a deliberate construction of fake history, systematic destruction of institutions that have made us a distinguished country, but a near total absence of deep intellect and understanding of issues that matter, whether it is political or economic or foreign policy related or social affairs. India, these are, if you remember, the early generations of our leaders were extraordinarily learned people. They came from different backgrounds, they had different orientations, but not one of them, you could say, was deficient in knowledge and learning. They were very deeply familiar with Indian culture. They were products of that culture which they enjoyed and cherished, but they were also very deeply familiar with Western culture. Many were widely traveled, many of them spoke foreign languages. Not one of them, having been abroad, was overwhelmed by the West. They all thought I have to learn from the West, but their commitment to India was very deep. In the 19th century, as we prepared for freedom, there were very intense debates in India at what would be the India that would emerge from freedom. And you had everyone saying, because we had no experience of this kind of discussion previously, everyone in India, some knowledge of the past Indian history, some knowledge of Indian affairs, some knowledge of the West, a kind of confusing amalgam of different impacts and different experiences and knowledge base. You had discussions right across from extreme left to extreme right. Very self-confident people were writing, and there were things to say. They were all over the place, not just the top leadership, even the second rung and the third rung. And all of this influenced our freedom struggle. And the freedom struggle became a broad church struggle, again representing the broad amalgam of India. And finally, when freedom came and we sat in the Constituent Assembly, all of these people, the products of the debates of the 19th century, came up with one consensually supported document. A document that celebrated India's past, the past that consists of an extraordinary achievements of ancient India, the great achievements of Islam, the encounters with Islam, the benefits of engagements with the Western culture and civilization, and finally the experience of our own internal debates and of the freedom struggle. The Constitution of India brings in itself the best wealth of Indian heritage and Indian tradition. It is not Nehruvian by any stretch of imagination. Nehru himself is a product of all these discussions and debates. as was Gandhi, and they were all very different people. What is happening today after 70 years and odd of freedom is to go back to the debates of the 19th century as if none of this happened, as if we've not lived the previous 70, 80 years as a free people, as a people. Celebrate unity in diversity. And you've never thought in terms of faith being regarded as a personal matter, not a political issue to be discussed on the streets. Now you come to foreign policy. I could go on this, but we come to the foreign policy. The foreign policy is linked not with any understanding of national interest. The word policy, by definition, means that certain people sit together, discuss the various issues involved. It could be the larger issues of national interest, or it could be a very specific issue, a response to an immediate problem. You sit together, you discuss options, you come up with certain lines of action, and then you decide this is what we will do. These are the resources we will provide. This is the way we will go forward, and these are the resources we will. Vision, strategy, action plan. I have not seen evidence of any of this, of any serious policy making, either with regard to the larger, understanding of national interest or specific responses to immediate challenges. Not seen any evidence. We lurch from day to day. We lurch from one challenge to another. We have no direction. Because we have no policy, we have no direction. And the saddest aspect, ladies and gentlemen, is the absence of the moral compass. Because India has always upheld the importance of a moral compass. We have never been an amoral people. All our rulers were measured on the yardstick of what did he do for his people beyond himself. Everyone is a ruler, an administrator, he is a conqueror, what have you. What was his? If we remember those people, their achievements are in terms of the welfare of the people, understanding of the interest and the welfare of the people. That moral compass, the loss of moral compass is crucial. Now, with regard to the issues that you said, I don't believe that we have an ideology. The definition of ideology indicates a very deep intellectual base on which you have some great intellectuals sit together and prepare tomes, which are then measured, studied, and then someone else contribute, and you have a huge quantum of literature, which you call ideology. And yes, you have in Western heritage certain aspects of this. I see Hindutva as a shallow ideology. Therefore, it comes within the definition of populism. A populism is an endeavor to seize political power on the basis of certain blandishments, certain offerings that you make to your people. Vast number of your people are frustrated. They believe that they have been betrayed by the rulers. They believe that there is a certain nexus of the elite that works against them. Populism, therefore, is the way I would define it. Why do I do that? Because I do not see any evidence of gravitas. I do not see any evidence of substantial writing. Ignorance and prejudice do not make for an ideology. I don't want to name names. All of you are familiar with what I'm speaking about. Coming now to where we are today. This affiliation, what passes for India's international relations? Firstly, the aggrandizement of the top leadership. This has nothing to do with international affairs. It has all to do with domestic affairs. To exalt the stature of the supreme leader. That is the main thing. And it has now reached certain levels of hilarious absurdity. But that is the single most important aspect. Means engagements all across the world are a very important and significant input with regard to cultivating their domestic constituency. This is the number one aspect of our foreign policy, I'm not calling it foreign policy, I'm calling it international relations or international engagements. There is, this is, I think, possibly predated, Mr. Modi, a concern about the rise of China. This confident India that I spoke about. When I retired from foreign service in 2011, you cannot imagine what an arrogant bastard I was. I felt that the future belonged to us. I believed that the India which I had participated in contributing to national interest, that we would be achieved and that the next generation would take this forward. Why did the Indian elite lose their confidence? And I'm going to put this up 2010, the first decade of this century, we were fine. We joined the BRICS. We were very close to China. We knew that China is making achievements, but we thought we could hold our own with them. We didn't see that crude rivalry with China. What happened? And I'm going to say to you, my personal thesis is, we lost it at the beginning, and I will date it 2013. 2013, Xi Jinping announced the Belt and Road Initiative. It was a part of a process. China had been going forward. We were together, and I think at the same level up to 1990, on par economically. And then they went ahead 5 times. 5 times. When he announced the Belt and Road Initiative, it was the public statement that China will now be a significant role player in regional and world affairs. I think the self-confidence of the Indian elite, not ever particularly patriotic, not ever extremely self-centered, extremely, constantly looking for themselves, very at the drop of a hat running abroad and becoming non-resident Indians, very subservient to Europeans and Americans. They lost their nerve. And that is overnight, that self-confidence that India had, some commitment we had to the multipolar world order in which we would be part of, all of that went. And what did we do? And it coincided with the end of the Manmohan period. I think Dr. Manmohan Singh himself was very pro-US, but he held the rock of commitment to India. He was pro-US and he believed that the US has a lot to give, but he was never going to subordinate India to the US. But what we had now, the panic that came into the Indian elite, if we have to face China, we don't have to develop domestic resources. Let's go to the Americans. And you started signing those interoperability agreements. 1, 2, 3, 4. And they celebrated it. And then you went, the greatest thing that you wanted from the American president, green card. Liberalize your green card for my people. Let them go freely. And that is what happened. So, a people who were already tuned to abandoning the motherland got a fresh impetus to do so. And they are deeply anchored in the United States, including overwhelmingly the people who come from the state from where our top leadership emerges. They have, and then you had the third aspect, crony capitalism. The sense of enterprise. When we were young, I mean, I had many issues with Dr. Manmohan Singh in terms of his neoliberal policies. But I must share with you that at that time, many of us people thought that there is a chance for me. I can also come up with a good idea. I can have a startup. I can come up with something and maybe I will be able to do something. People were still looking for employment, but they were also looking for opportunity. That has gone. This crude crony capitalism has sapped the initiative and the self-confidence of our youth. And you are not able to give anything back to them in terms of employment. Employment भी नहीं है, opportunity भी नहीं है. They become cannon fodder. Many of them, you have seen what they are doing. They have become, how they are migrating. They are migrating in such horrible circumstances, taking such rotten jobs. Many of them, families go pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to be able to migrate as illegals. We are a source of contempt. They are a source of contempt. So this is, now we come to, so there's no ideology in any of this. I don't also buy this business of conspiracy because that implies an application of the mind which is entirely missing. I do not believe that there is any reflection about world order, whether the United States will be up or down, in or out, because the United States has failed in every enterprise it has taken. My argument about the United States is that it is a world power. It is a superpower. By definition, it will look out only for itself. By definition, not a single American soldier will die for my safety and security. The one close friend of mine, Mr. Vijay Gokhale, he wrote a book, The Rise of China, and he requested me to be the discussant. I read the book. It's a very good book, extremely lucid account of the rise of China. And I was the discussant. So I praised the book, I talked about it, I described how China grew, etc. Total focus on development, right? And welfare. Development, welfare. And I finished, I asked my audience this question. I said, when I finished this book, the story of China from 1980 to 2020, 40 years, I asked myself, what was India doing during this period? When China went from being our equal to having an economy 5 times our size, a technological giant, a military giant, one respected by major powers. And what was my answer? Identity politics. We mired ourselves in identity politics. From the early 80s, we had the temple movement. That became central. Governments rose and fell on that basis. The virus of communal discord and divide became central. Communal riots became very intense, even after the temple had been realized. We had a short interlude with Vajpayee ji, but he did not believe that the Hindutva project could be taken too rapidly forward, and he had around him people who counseled restraint. Where Dr. Manmohan Singh was concerned, we can talk about that in greater detail, but where the failure occurred was his failure to stem the tide of rampant corruption within his ranks. And that is what the opposition picked up on. The 2014 campaign was not about Hindutva at all. The word Hindutva was never mentioned. Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas was mentioned. It was corruption. And that became, today when I speak to you, Dr. Manmohan Singh's regime looks like saintly, Saint Peter incarnate, compared to the villainy that we have today. So I would say that we are, I'm going to say this very honestly, and it breaks my heart to say it, we are a very, very demoralized people. The promise that I had and the arrogance and hubris that I had possibly, and maybe that was, if 2011, 2012 has vanished. People are in disarray. Ordinary people, they don't have any, they have nothing to look forward to. No sense of enthusiasm. Very poor quality education. Very poor quality health services. Very poor quality infrastructure. What happened to all of those wonderful things we saw? None of them even talks about it today. And you have what is corroding us from very deeply, right across from Kashmir to Kerala, the rampant corruption. This is my answer to your question. There is no policy. There's a policy, whatever it is worth, is subservience to the United States. It's not policy because the Americans treat you with contempt. Donald Trump doesn't believe in placating anyone who is subservient to him because he expects that, as is right. The only language Donald Trump understands is the language of self-confidence and courage. I would wish that that is what we would be able to say to him. We did that before. I always remind people about Indira. Nehru told, just after the second, told the victorious Americans, I did not fight for freedom to become enslaved after I have become free, and refused to join the Western Alliance. Indira Gandhi went to a very hostile Washington, sat with Nixon, told him the facts of life about East Pakistan, did her duty, came back and went to war. Very, very clear. Self-confident. We held our own. I'm sure Maniji will be able to tell us many more things. We don't have time for all that. But this has been, we have a saga of courage, of not being subservient to anyone. Look at the way the Americans, even third-rate people, you have an ambassador who calls himself a special envoy to whatever, something or the other, sends a message of congratulations to an ambassador in Dhaka, and that ambassador comes back and says, I look forward to working closely with you. What a travesty this is. This is not the way the Indian Foreign Service would have functioned, the Foreign Office would have allowed. Taking instructions, I mean, you are going to work with he's an ambassador of a foreign country, man. So let us leave this. It's a saga of sadness and disappointment. But this is me opening up. And there it is. We live with all that.
There are, thank you. There are many questions in the chat box, but before we take up that, I will request Professor Aditya Mukherjee to share his comments. Professor Aditya Mukherjee, Aditya Tap, please. आप अनम्यूट कर पा रहे हैं आपको अपने आप को?
जी.
Please.
I would only like to repeat what Mani said, that this was an absolutely outstanding lecture, and it really involves a lot of thinking about it. A very wide-ranging and, as expected, extremely well-informed lecture. I have only point of disappointment would be that Talmiz Saab ends with absolutely no hope. Now that that worries me. That if a person like him speaks like that, I would say that
I mentioned course correction.
But I would say that on the basis of what he said, I mean, the way he described India's civilizational history, many centuries of a particular way of thinking, to which if we can add the tradition of resistance that was built up over the entire national movement, particularly under Gandhiji. Now, these things do not die out. If till 2012 he could say that we were proud Indians, we cannot just become doormats, in 2026. So obviously there is something that is suppressed by this incredibly harsh regime, but it is just as he described for Iran. I would say in India, the Indian people are suppressed, and that suppression is going to burst out. It has burst out in many occasions earlier, like during the Punjab farmer struggle. It burst out during the anti-CAA movement. It is there on the boil, and we hope that it gets the correct leadership and we are able to end the evil that we are all witnessing today. Thank you very much, Talmiz Saab. Absolutely brilliant.
Thank you, sir.
I will request Comrade Bhargav to take up the questions in the chat box. Bhargav, please.
Yeah. Thank you, Subhash, and thank you, Talmiz Saab, for this wonderful and insightful presentation and overview, the kind of overview you gave. Thank you very much. And there are certain comments and some questions in chat box. First, I would like to share a question from Niranjan Pant. One is, there are 2-3 questions from this person. How many Arab and Gulf leadership has copied?
Bhargav, can I interrupt?
Please.
Niranjan Sahab is here. You could check with him if he would like to speak. Niranjan Sahab is here.
Yeah. Please, Niranjan Sahab, if you can voice your own questions, that will be much more That will be much better. Please, Niranjan sir, please unmute yourself and.
Uh,
Maybe he went away. Sorry,
I,
Bhargav.
no, I joined the rest of the audience in complimenting Talmiz Ahmed for this wonderful lecture and comments. I
Okay.
hope he remembers a brief meeting years ago in Saudi Arabia when he was the ambassador. There is very little that is there to ask, but there are one or two points that I wanted to ask. I think that Trump, his emphasis on Trump, I mean, we all know that what kind of guy he is, but Trump is only a crude symptom of the disease called USA. And democratic presidents have also been equal warmongers and pro-Israel. So have been most of the Western countries. So I was hoping that you will throw some light on the genesis of this pro-Israel tilt in this US and European combined, although this combined seems to be a little weakened these days. Second thing is that I wanted to ask was perhaps also needed to comment on the aggressive theocratic regime of Iran, which has provided some rational, however weak, for the Israel and US to launch such a horrific assault on Iran and its people. These are just these 2 points in the main I would have liked to ask. Thank you.
Any other question?
Yeah, I will
Bhargav, please.
I will just take from the chat box.
Yes, please.
There is another question from Mehnad Abdullah. When you say nationalism has replaced revolutionary Islam as the binding force in the Iranian society, what elements of nationalism are performing integrative role, and how is this different from the role religion has traditionally played? And another question from Alok Tandanji. What is the reason of India abdicating its responsibility and safeguard its interests in West Asia? These are the two questions.
I think the second one I've answered. About India, I have already answered. But with regard to the US, why it is pro-Israel, there is a very long history. It happens up to Eisenhower, 1956, the US was not particularly or emotionally affiliated with Israel. As you know, Eisenhower took a very tough position on the 1956 invasion, which he saw as colonial in character. Britain, France, and Israel invading Egypt. Surprising. The change came with the 67 war. The 67 war also led to, firstly, there was this celebration of victory, military victory. Though, of course, the Americans played a very crucial role in that war, but leave that aside. Israel worked very hard to build a support base within the United States. The origin of the lobby, the Israel lobby, the emergence of AIPAC. Already there were some elements there fighting against anti-Semitism, but it became a very organized thing. The Jewish community within the United States was utilized for the purpose. The idea of Judeo-Christian civilization, it had come up earlier, and Truman and Eisenhower both had used it, but it became resonant under Ronald Reagan, where he pushed this point very strongly. It's fake. Historically, it is fake. There is no such thing as Judeo-Christian civilization because the Christians were very hostile to the Jews. And it has no resonance in Europe either. But in the United States, this became central to the political discourse. The major influence then, which the Americans built up sometime in the 1980s, with the Israelis built up, was with the Christian evangelists. The Christian evangelists of the United States have certain views with regard to end times. And one of their understanding of end times is that there is the Antichrist. The Antichrist will be defeated by Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ will come. He will ask the Jews whether to become Christian or they will die a horrible death. And then there will be 1,000 years of peace. And then we will have the end. This peculiar thing, very deep understanding of the Bible, the Old Testament, means that the Muslim is the Antichrist. And therefore, the expulsion of Muslims from the Holy Land is crucial for expediting the end times, the second coming, as it is called. And therefore, the 67 war was welcomed as the defeat of the Muslims and the emergence of Jews. That means ultimately Jews have to dominate the entire world at this space. Therefore, they do not allow this West Bank, and those people have to be expelled, because this whole area, this is not a Jewish view, it is a Christian view. And these people are also called Christian Zionists. So Christian Zionists have become a very powerful support base. The next support base that emerged was the neocons. The neocons are Jewish intellectuals in the United States who were able to work with the political leadership and assure them that the interests of Israel and the interests of the United States are identical. And that is how, and Netanyahu was a very central role player in this. And they had their own discourse. Their apex of their power was George Bush Jr. He not only took the support of the Christian evangelists, but he himself was a born-again Christian. And his administration was very much influenced by the neocons, particularly the first term. They were the ones who responded to 9/11 and encouraged the attack upon Afghanistan and the attack upon Iraq. The failure of both these attacks discredited the neocons. And therefore, you don't hear, they are still there, but you don't hear much about them. Donald Trump tapped into the Christian evangelists. And many of the people around him, like his Vice President Pence, etc., they're Christian evangelists. Even this fellow, the Defense Secretary, etc. So he has surrounded himself by Christian evangelists in the first term, and now also in the second term, he doesn't talk much about it because he doesn't have any election to fight. He's more happy with these billionaires. There is one very powerful group which we don't hear about very much, the Jewish billionaire. The Jewish billionaire, there are about 7 or 8 or 10 of them. They're very powerful in educational institutions because they give donations. They're very powerful in the corporate sector, very powerful in the finance sector, very powerful in the media sector. For example, when the pro-Palestine demonstrations took place in different universities, it is the billionaires, Jewish billionaires, who got the administration to say any student found demonstrating will be expelled or will not get any degree or will be jailed and certainly will get no employment. Immediately you will see that the demonstrations withered away. So this is the support base. It is still there. Donald Trump is upset because he's a megalomaniac. He thought that he would be dancing on the world stage as a statesman and a warrior. But he looks pathetic. People are calling him an idiot. So all of these reasons, you find that there is a certain shift away. How deep is it? We do not know. Because American politics, particularly Donald Trump, but all of them, money plays a very big role. And these businessmen are going to ensure that support base. They need, now you have elections every 2 years in the United States. Everyone needs money. All the time you need campaign support. And that is what is happening. So I would say to you that the American system as of now is totally committed to Israel. Are there changes taking place? Yes. These changes reflect the demographic changes, they reflect the ideological change. More and more over the last 40, 50 years, more and more non-white immigrants have come and held senior positions. People from South Asia, people from West Asia, Southeast Asia, Japan, China, Korea, etc. They are not immediately enthusiastic about Israel. They are a very big, like the Mamdani is one more case in this regard. And then of course you have many of them now entering politics. So for step by step, there is a certain change taking place. A lot of discussion. Large numbers of American Jews, particularly young people, have moved away from supporting Israel because they see nothing in common with the values of Netanyahu. And they don't believe that support for Israel is anymore an essential part of their Jewish identity. So many important changes, demographic, ideological, ideational, in terms of values, etc., are already happening. Uh, with regard to Iran, Iran is more difficult to explain because there is a lot of literature available, but it is very, very solid and very diverse. And different people will tell you different things at the same time. The article I read, it came in Financial Affairs. It's a joint article written by a lady, Nargis Bujadi, and Wali Nasser. Wali Nasser, I know the name because he is very well known. They are the ones who have argued that the stranglehold of theocracy is much less a motive force for the second and third generation who are now at the helm of affairs, and that they base themselves on nationalism. Now, this is not elaborated in that article. Nationalism of Iran is, I'm a student of Iranian strategic culture. So nationalism of Iran is founded on their ancient history, their early history, when their argument is that every time Iran has been defeated, it has never been totally vanquished, it bounces back. When the Arabs defeated them at the Battle of Qadisiyah, they became very significant role players in the Abbasid Caliphate. They also draw their nationalism from the great pride in their literature, the Shahnama of Firdausi, and many other monuments, everything. So ancient civilization, the ability to bounce back, and the ability, and then very recently, their literature, etc. Yes, the idea of being a Shia nation is important factor in that. But other experiences are the period of humiliation when the Western powers dominated Iran, their experience of the Iraq-Iran war, where they felt that the whole world turned against them just to destroy the revolution. These are also seminal influences. Which one is the most significant today? I think I will wait a little bit. As of now, I don't know enough to be able to make very substantial points, but we will keep on studying this thing, and maybe at some stage we will be able to talk about it in greater detail. Why has India abdicated? I think I have answered that the loss of self-confidence is a very important part. The self-confidence has been corroded, A, by the rise of China, B, a certain absence of real achievement at home in any area. I don't know if the political leadership fully understands the corrosive impact of crony capitalism, the rise of 3 or 4 houses at the expense of a very senior people. I have links in Bombay. Very prominent businessmen in Bombay are demoralized. Saying, ये क्या है, ये क्या है भाई, एक आदमी को हर एक कॉन्ट्रैक्ट मिलता जाता है, तो हमारा इसमें क्या है बात? Then the demoralization of young people. That is, again, in my case, anecdotal. I'm not pretending I move, or I'm not an activist. I don't move around as much as I can or should. But the feedback you get is one of being disillusioned. Except for a very hardcore bunch today, pervasive sense of disillusionment. Now, just to address what Mr. Aditya Mukherjee said, I should say that I am the world's greatest optimist. I never give up. I don't believe that in a period of 10 or 15 years, you can corrode India's values, which were been hammered into us over 5,000 years. I don't believe that. It is not something that under any human being constructed, nor is it possible for any individual or a group of individuals to destroy. The core values of India are eternal, and they will manifest themselves at various times. Every nation is tested from time to time. We are passing through a severe test. As you remember, Abraham Lincoln's address at Gettysburg, that we will be tested on this, whether that nation or any nation can so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. And the principles he's talking about are the principles that we uphold. So yes, the nations are tested. United States was tested in the Civil War. It was tested again when you had the assassinations of Kennedy and Martin Luther King. It has come out in a certain way. It has the outstanding example of course correction. We have had a very solid run of achievement. So this is our test now, 70, 80 years, a nation is tested. And it's the values that it had adhered to are tested. That are they really as resilient as we thought? Are they really as solid as we thought? Let the people decide. If we are going upholders of these values, let us show whether the value is really as deep as we thought. Or are we just mavericks looking for the green card? So I am very confident that this will happen. I just regret the fact that I am experiencing this at a certain age, which I could have done without. But anyway, we are here, we are witnesses, and every witness has a moral duty, because we are privileged, moral duty to speak his mind and say that this is what I have observed and understood, and I want to share it with you. So shall we call it a day, sir?
Yeah.
I'm
Maybe
fine.
you have to
I'm
take
okay. It has been a great pleasure to interact with you and your colleagues.
Really,
I was not, I had never even heard of your organization, and I was very flattered that you thought of inviting me. I appreciate that. And
yeah, really.
maybe after 6 months or a year, when we've had more clarity about what is happening, you can call me again, and I will update my
Sure.
remarks and see
Yeah,
where I was wrong, which needs to be corrected.
yeah,
All
yeah.
right.
Fantastic, sir. Fantastic. We are honored, actually. We are honored. Thank you so much for this
I
evening.
wish you all the best. Thank you very
We
much.
once again thank you for the
Thank
presentation,
you, sir.
sharing time for us, and the important takeaways from the discussion. We'll continue the discussion among us, and also would like to learn from you again.
Thank you. We are students. We are
Yeah,
permanent
yeah,
students.
yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all of you for joining the